One of the biggest questions I get from Americans moving abroad, like to the Philippines, is what happens to your health insurance? Because let's be honest, healthcare is one of the biggest concerns when leaving your own country, like America.
And honestly, there's a lot of different ways people handle it. Do you keep US insurance? Do you get insurance in another country? Or do some people actually just go without? And the truth is, there's not one single answer. Today, I want to talk about how Americans living abroad actually handle health insurance and share what I've personally learned since moving to the Philippines. Because if you're thinking about living overseas, this is definitely something you'll want to think about ahead of time. One of the first things I learned after moving abroad is that Americans handle health insurance in very different ways. Some people keep their US insurance, some get international insurance, some buy local insurance in the country they move to, and honestly, some people just pay out of pocket, and depending on your age, your health, and your budget, any one of these options might make sense. But one thing that surprises a lot of Americans is just how different healthcare costs can be outside the United States. In many countries, healthcare is simply much more affordable, and that changes how people think about insurance. One of the most common approaches I've seen is Americans living abroad simply paying out of pocket. And the reason is pretty simple. Healthcare costs in many countries are significantly lower. Here in the Philippines, for example, a doctor visit can cost anywhere from around $10 to $30. Basic lab work might cost $20 to $50. Even private hospitals can often be far more affordable compared to what you'd pay in the United States. Because of this, some Americans decide it's easier to just pay for care when they need it. This is especially common for people who are relatively healthy and don't expect frequent medical visits. But this approach does come with risk, because while routine care may be affordable, major emergencies can still be expensive. And that's where having some kind of plan becomes important. Another option many Americans consider is getting local health insurance in the country they're living in. Here in the Philippines, for example, some expats sign up for local private insurance. Others may also look into programs like PhilHealth. These options are often much more affordable than insurance in the United States, but they may not cover everything, and coverage can sometimes be limited. So for some Americans, local insurance works as a basic safety net. It may not cover everything, but it provides some peace of mind. Another option is international health insurance. These plans are designed specifically for people living abroad, and they often cover multiple countries, which can be helpful if you travel. The downside is, these plans can be more expensive. Depending on your age, international insurance can cost $100, $200, or sometimes even more per month. But for many people, that cost is worth the peace of mind, especially when thinking about major emergencies. Another option that many Americans living abroad look into is medical evacuation insurance. This type of insurance doesn't necessarily cover routine care, but instead focuses on major emergencies. For example, if something serious happens, like a major surgery or medical emergency, this type of insurance can help transport you back to the United States, and for many Americans, this provides a lot of peace of mind. Because while healthcare in the Philippines can be very good, some people still feel more comfortable having major procedures done in the United States, especially if they already have doctors back home or insurance coverage in the US. Medical evacuation insurance is often much more affordable than full international health insurance, which is why many expats choose this option. Some Americans also choose to keep their US health insurance. This is especially common for people who travel back to the United States to visit family or friends. Having US coverage can act as a backup plan. Others may use travel insurance when visiting the US. Again, there's no perfect solution. It really comes down to your personal situation, your comfort level, and your budget. Now, as for me personally, this is something I'm still figuring out. Right now, I don't have health insurance here in the Philippines. I've only been living here about a year, and I'm still learning how everything works and what makes the most sense long term. So far, I've been paying out of pocket for doctor visits, and honestly, it's been very affordable. I also have an HSA account, so if something comes up, I can use those funds. Since I don't currently have any major health issues, this approach has worked for me. But now that I'm more settled, I'm starting to seriously look into healthcare options. Paying out of pocket works, but it's always good to have a backup plan. And I think that's something many Americans living abroad eventually do. And from talking with other Americans living abroad, I've noticed that many people take a similar approach. They move abroad, learn how things work, and then adjust their healthcare plan over time. Another thing that comes up often is Medicare. Many Americans living abroad still qualify for Medicare, but Medicare typically doesn't cover you outside the United States. Because of that, some Americans keep Medicare as a backup option. That way, if they return to the US, they still have coverage. Others choose to opt out, depending on their situation. This is another reason why many Americans combine different approaches like paying out of pocket abroad, but keeping US coverage as a backup. One more factor many Americans consider is where they plan to spend their later years. Some people move abroad for a few years, then eventually return to the United States. Others plan to stay long-term, and this decision can affect how you approach healthcare. If you plan to return to the US, eventually you may want to keep certain coverage options available, but if you plan to stay abroad long-term, you may focus more on local or international coverage. Again, there's no one right answer. It's all about planning ahead and finding what works best for your situation. Another thing many Americans think about before moving abroad is what happens if something serious happens long-term. For example, what if you need ongoing treatment or long-term care or specialized surgery? These are things that many people don't think about at first, because when you're planning a move abroad, it's easy to focus on the cost of living, housing, and lifestyle. But healthcare is something that becomes more important over time. And this is why many Americans living abroad continue adjusting their healthcare plans, even years after they move. Some start without insurance, then later add coverage. Others start with full insurance, then later switch to paying out of pocket. It's really something that evolves over time. And it's also important to remember healthcare systems can vary depending on where you live. In larger cities, you may have more options, more hospitals, and more specialists available. But in smaller areas, your options may be more limited. This is another reason why many Americans take time to learn the healthcare system after moving abroad, because understanding what's available near you can help you make better long-term decisions. I think the biggest takeaway is this: moving abroad can lower your cost of living, but healthcare is still something you want to plan for. Whether that's paying out of pocket, getting local insurance, international insurance, or keeping US coverage, there's no one right answer. It's all about finding what works best for you. I'm curious, if you're living abroad, how do you handle health insurance? Do you pay out of pocket? Do you have insurance? Or are you still figuring it out? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're thinking about moving abroad, make sure to subscribe. Because here on Nomad Island Escapes, we share real-life experiences living in the Philippines to help you decide if this lifestyle might be right for you.